I walked into my kitchen at 6:47 a.m., still wearing yesterday's clothes, my hands shaking as I reached for the coffee maker. The notification count on my phone had climbed to 247 overnight. 247 strangers telling me I deserved everything that was happening to me. You know that moment when your entire world shifts, and you realize there's no going back? Mine happened 3 weeks ago when I posted what I thought was a reasonable complaint on Nextdoor about my neighbor's music. Now I'm packing boxes, wondering how a simple noise complaint turned me into the most hated person in Maplewood Heights. But let me back up, because what happened to me could happen to anyone. My name is Karen Mitchell, and yes, I know what you're thinking. Trust me, I've heard every joke about my name in the past month. I'm 42, work in accounting for a mid-sized insurance company, and until recently, I thought I lived in a pretty decent neighborhood. The kind of place where people wave when they're getting their mail, where kids still ride bikes in the street, where the biggest drama used to be Mrs. Henderson's roses growing over the property line. I moved to Rosewood Drive 4 years ago after my divorce. It was supposed to be my fresh start. Small ranch house, manageable mortgage, quiet street. Perfect for someone who just wanted to rebuild her life without any unnecessary complications. The Johnsons moved in next door about 18 months ago. Nice enough family, at first. Mike worked construction, Sarah stayed home with their twin boys. They seemed normal. They waved. They kept their lawn neat. They even brought me cookies when they first moved in. Then the parties started. Not every weekend at first. Maybe once a month, they'd have friends over. Music, laughter, cars parked up and down the street. I didn't mind initially. I mean, people have a right to enjoy their homes, right? But it gradually got louder. More frequent. The music would start around 7 and go until well past midnight. I work early shifts. I'm in the office by 7:30 most days, which means I'm usually in bed by 10:30. When you're lying there listening to bass lines thumping through your bedroom wall at 1 in the morning, it starts to wear on you. The first time I said something, I walked over during one of their Friday night gatherings. I could hear the music from my driveway, so I figured a polite conversation was in order. Sarah answered the door with a red Solo cup in her hand, laughing at something someone had said behind her. "Hey Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice friendly. "Sorry to bother you, but the music's pretty loud tonight. Think you could turn it down just a bit?" She looked at me like I'd asked her to donate a kidney. "It's Friday night, Karen. We're just having some friends over." "I understand that, but it's after 11, and I have work tomorrow morning." "It's Friday night," she repeated, slower this time, like I was stupid. People are allowed to have fun on Friday nights. The door closed in my face before I could respond. I stood there on their front steps for probably 30 seconds, feeling that familiar heat creep up my neck. You know that feeling, when you're trying to be reasonable, trying to be the bigger person, and someone treats you like you're being ridiculous for having basic expectations? I went home and put in earplugs. Told myself it was just one night. But it wasn't just one night. The parties got bigger. The music got louder. Soon it was Friday and Saturday nights, then Thursday through Sunday. The bass was so heavy it rattled my bedroom windows. I started sleeping on my living room couch just to get away from the noise. I tried talking to them again. Twice more, actually. Each time, Sarah became less polite and more dismissive. The third time, Mike answered the door and basically told me to mind my own business. Said if I didn't like noise, maybe I should move somewhere without neighbors. That's when I discovered Nextdoor. For those who don't know, Nextdoor is this social media app for neighborhoods. People post about lost pets, recommend contractors, share crime alerts, that sort of thing. I'd been on it for about a year but rarely posted anything. Mostly I just lurked, reading other people's complaints and recommendations. But sitting on my couch at 12:47 a.m. on a Saturday night, listening to what sounded like a full concert happening 20 feet from my bedroom, I decided to write a post. I kept it factual. No name-calling, no dramatics. I explained the situation, mentioned that I'd tried talking to them directly, and asked if anyone had suggestions for dealing with chronic noise issues. I even said I understood people have a right to enjoy their homes, but that it needed to be balanced with neighbors' rights to peaceful enjoyment of their own properties. I posted it and went to bed on the couch again, figuring maybe a few neighbors would offer some advice. I woke up to my phone buzzing non-stop. The post had 43 comments and had been shared to 3 other neighborhood Facebook groups. People were taking sides. Some supported me, sharing their own noise complaint stories. Others called me every name in the book. Mind your own business, Karen. Maybe if you had a life, you wouldn't care what your neighbors are doing. This is exactly what's wrong with suburbia, nosy neighbors with nothing better to do. Poor Karen needs her beauty sleep at the ripe old age of 42. But the worst part? Someone had taken a screenshot of my profile picture and turned it into a meme. My face, with text overlay, "When your neighbor has friends but you don't." It had been shared over 200 times across various social media platforms by the end of that first day. I was mortified. I'd never experienced anything like that level of public attention, and certainly not negative attention. I considered deleting the post, but then I thought, why should I? I hadn't said anything inappropriate. I'd been respectful and reasonable. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was responding to some of the comments. When someone suggested that maybe I should just get a life instead of policing my neighbors, I pointed out that wanting basic consideration wasn't unreasonable. When another person said I was probably just jealous that I didn't have friends, I mentioned that I valued quality over quantity when it came to relationships. Each response I made seemed to pour gasoline on the fire. The Nextdoor algorithm started showing my post to more and more people. Soon it had spread beyond our immediate neighborhood to surrounding areas. People who didn't even live near me were commenting, calling me entitled, privileged, a typical suburban Karen. And that's when the real problem started. 3 days after my post went viral, I came home from work to find my garbage cans knocked over, trash scattered across my front yard. Could have been animals, but the way it was spread looked deliberate. Like someone had taken the time to really make a mess. The next morning, someone had egged my car. Not just a few eggs, they'd used at least a dozen, covering the windshield, hood, and driver's side door. The smell was horrific, and the shells had scratched my paint. I called the police to file a report, but the officer who responded seemed more annoyed than helpful. He took down the information, but I could tell he wasn't taking it seriously. When I mentioned the Nextdoor post, he actually rolled his eyes. "Ma'am, if you're having neighbor disputes, maybe you should try talking to them directly instead of posting about it online." I wanted to scream. I had tried talking to them directly. Multiple times. But I just nodded and signed the report, knowing it would probably disappear into some filing cabinet and never be seen again. The pranks escalated. Someone put shaving cream all over my front door handle. My morning newspaper started disappearing. One day I came home to find a dozen pizza delivery guys at my front door, all with orders I hadn't placed. The embarrassment of explaining to each one that I hadn't ordered anything, seeing their frustration at wasted trips, knowing that someone had deliberately used my address for fake orders. But the worst part was how isolated I felt. Neighbors who used to wave when they saw me started looking away. Mrs. Peterson, who lived across the street and used to chat with me when we were both getting our mail, completely ignored me. The mailman started giving me odd looks. I found out why when my friend Jessica, who lives about 10 minutes away, sent me a screenshot. Someone had created a fake social media account using my name and picture, and was posting all sorts of inflammatory things. Racist comments, political rants, nasty messages about other neighbors. None of it was me, but it was convincing enough that people believed it. "Karen's really lost it," one person commented. "I always knew she was probably like this underneath." "This is why I don't trust quiet neighbors," said another. "They're always the ones with the most issues." I reported the fake accounts, but social media companies take forever to respond to that stuff. Meanwhile, my reputation was being destroyed by someone pretending to be me, saying things I would never say. The stress was overwhelming. I started having trouble sleeping, even when the Johnsons weren't having parties. My work performance suffered because I was constantly distracted, checking my phone to see what new horrible thing someone had posted about me. I lost 8 pounds in 2 weeks because my stomach was in knots constantly. And through all of this, the parties continued. If anything, they got louder and more frequent, like the Johnsons were celebrating their victory over the uptight neighbor who dared to complain. That's when I made my third mistake. I posted an update. Looking back, I should have just let it die. Should have deleted my social media accounts, maybe even considered moving. But I was angry. I felt like I was being painted as some kind of monster when all I'd done was ask for reasonable consideration. So I posted again, this time with pictures. Photos of my egged car, my trashed yard, screenshots of the fake social media accounts. I explained what had been happening to me, how a simple noise complaint had turned into harassment and cyberbullying. "I know many of you think I'm just a complaining neighbor," I wrote. "But this has gone way beyond noise issues. This is now about basic human decency and how we treat each other in our community." The response was swift and brutal. "Playing the victim much, Karen? Maybe if you hadn't started drama online, none of this would have happened. Actions have consequences. You put yourself out there, now deal with it." This is what happens when Karens think they can police everyone else's behavior. But then something unexpected happened. A few people started defending me. Neighbors I didn't even know began sharing their own stories about noise issues, about feeling afraid to speak up because they'd seen what happened to me. "I've been dealing with the same thing with my neighbors' parties," wrote someone named Patricia_M. "But after seeing what Karen went through, I'm too scared to say anything." "This isn't about noise anymore," posted another user. "This is about bullying. Nobody deserves to be harassed like this, regardless of whether you agree with their complaint." For the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe I wasn't completely alone. Maybe some people could see that this had gotten out of hand. That feeling lasted exactly 48 hours. Because that's when someone dug up my arrest record. 10 years ago, I was arrested for DUI. It was during the worst period of my marriage, when my ex-husband's gambling addiction had drained our savings and I was drinking too much to cope with the stress. I hit rock bottom, made a terrible decision to drive after having too much wine at dinner, and got pulled over 3 blocks from my house. I spent a night in jail, lost my license for 6 months, went through mandatory counseling, and completely changed my relationship with alcohol. It was the wake-up call I needed to get my life together, leave my marriage, and start over. I hadn't had more than 1 glass of wine in a single evening since then. But criminal records are public, and someone had taken the time to look mine up. "Guess who's been hiding something," the post read, along with a screenshot of my mugshot and arrest details. "Our neighborhood Karen has a drinking problem. Maybe that's why she's so bitter and angry all the time." The comments were vicious. "No wonder she hates it when people have fun. She's probably jealous that she can't drink anymore. Drunk drivers like this woman could have hurt my kids. She has no right to judge anyone else. Once a drunk, always a drunk. This explains everything about her behavior." I sat in my living room, staring at my phone, feeling like the walls were closing in. 10 years of sobriety, 10 years of rebuilding my life, 10 years of being a better person, and none of it mattered. One mistake from my lowest point was now being used to justify everything that was happening to me. That night, someone threw a brick through my front window. I was upstairs when I heard the crash, followed by the sound of glass scattering across my hardwood floor. By the time I got downstairs and looked outside, whoever did it was gone. There was a note tied to the brick, "Move." I called the police again, but this time the officer was actually sympathetic. Maybe because criminal property damage was harder to dismiss than egged cars and scattered garbage. "Ma'am, I'm going to be honest with you," he said as he filled out the report. "This situation has gotten out of hand. Have you considered staying somewhere else for a while? Maybe with family or friends? Just until things cool down?" "So they win?" I asked. "I get driven out of my own home because I asked my neighbors to turn down their music?" He looked uncomfortable. "I'm not saying they win. I'm saying sometimes it's better to be safe than right." That phrase hit me hard. Be safe than right. But what happens when being right is the only thing you have left? I spent that night at a hotel, then the next night at my sister's house an hour away. But I couldn't stay away forever. I had a job, a mortgage, a life. I couldn't let them drive me out of my own home. When I came back 2 days later, I found my mailbox had been vandalized. Someone had spray-painted "Drunk Karen" across the side in bright red letters. My homeowners association had already left a notice saying I had 48 hours to clean or replace it, or face fines. I stood in my driveway, looking at that graffiti, and something inside me snapped. Not in an angry way, but in a clarity way. I suddenly saw the whole situation differently. This wasn't about noise anymore. This wasn't even about me anymore. This was about what happens when a community decides someone doesn't belong, and how quickly things can spiral out of control. I realized I had 3 options. I could move away and let them win. I could continue fighting and probably make things worse. Or I could try something completely different. That's when I decided to do something that probably sounds crazy, but felt like the only sane choice left. I planned a block party. Not for me, for everyone. A community gathering to try to reset the entire dynamic. I spent my savings on it. Rented tables, hired a DJ, bought enough food for 60 people. I sent handwritten invitations to every house on our street and the 2 adjacent streets. The invitation was simple: you're invited to a community block party this Saturday. Food, music, and a chance for all of us to start over. Let's remember we're neighbors, not enemies. I didn't expect many people to show up. Honestly, I half expected someone to call the police and report it as a public disturbance. But I figured it was worth trying. Saturday came, and I set everything up in the park at the end of our street. Tables loaded with sandwiches, salads, chips, drinks. The DJ started playing music, not too loud, just background volume. I stood there at 2 o'clock, wondering if I'd just thrown a very expensive party for myself. Then Mrs. Peterson showed up. She walked over slowly, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Karen," she said, "I owe you an apology. I should never have stopped talking to you. I was afraid of getting caught up in all the drama, but that was cowardly of me." 20 minutes later, the Hendersons arrived with their teenage daughter. Then the Martinez family from 3 houses down. Slowly, people started trickling in. Not everyone, maybe half the neighborhood. But enough to make it feel like an actual community gathering. The Johnsons didn't come. I watched their house throughout the afternoon, hoping they might change their minds, but they stayed inside with their curtains drawn. Around 4 o'clock, while I was refilling the chip bowls, a woman I didn't recognize approached me. She introduced herself as Linda, said she lived about 6 blocks away. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "I was one of the people posting nasty comments about you online. I got caught up in the mob mentality, and I said things I shouldn't have said. I don't even know you, but I judged you based on what other people were saying." She paused, looking genuinely ashamed. "Then my daughter showed me some of the fake accounts someone made using your name. I realized how easy it is for someone's reputation to be destroyed online, and I felt sick about my part in it." "Thank you for telling me that," I said. "It means more than you know. I also wanted you to know. I think I know who's been doing some of the harassment. My teenage son, he's friends with the Johnson boys. He heard them bragging about some pranks they pulled on the crazy lady next door. I don't have proof, but... My heart sank. Teenagers. Of course. It probably started as a joke, escalated as they got more reactions, and spiraled completely out of control when adults started joining in. I'm not saying you should confront them, Linda continued. But maybe their parents should know what their kids have been up to. That evening, after everyone had gone home and I was cleaning up, Mike Johnson appeared. I tensed up, wondering if he was going to yell at me for having a party without permission, or complain about the music, or just generally continue the hostility. Instead, he looked embarrassed. Karen, he said, we need to talk. Linda Martinez came by after your party. She told us some things about what our boys might have been doing. He ran his hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable. Look, I had no idea they were vandalizing your property or making fake accounts. Sarah and we were angry about your next-door posts, but we never told them to retaliate like that. What are you saying? I asked. I'm saying we're sorry. Not for having parties. I still think you overreacted with that first post. But we're sorry it escalated to harassment and property damage. That's not okay, no matter how annoyed we were. He pulled out his phone and showed me a Venmo transfer. $300. This should cover the damage to your car and your mailbox. And we'll make sure the boys apologize to you personally. I stared at the notification on his phone, feeling a mix of relief and frustration. Relief that maybe this nightmare was finally ending, but frustration that it had taken months of harassment and a community block party for them to acknowledge that things had gone too far. Mike, I said, I need you to understand something. I never wanted to be the neighborhood villain. I just wanted to get some sleep on weeknights. If you had been willing to compromise even a little bit in the beginning. I know, he said. We could have handled it better. All of us could have. The next week was surreal. The harassment stopped completely. My fake social media accounts were finally removed after I provided documentation about the identity theft. A few more neighbors reached out to apologize for their part in the online pile-on. But the damage was done in ways that couldn't be easily repaired. I'd learned things about my community, and about how quickly people can turn on someone, that I couldn't unknow. I'd seen how easily mob mentality can take over, even among people who consider themselves reasonable and fair. The Johnsons did turn down their music after that conversation, but our relationship never really recovered. We coexist now, politely but distantly. They wave when they see me, but there's an awkwardness that wasn't there before all this started. 6 months later, I decided to move anyway. Not because they drove me out, but because staying felt like trying to rebuild a house on a foundation that had cracked too severely. I found a small condo in a quieter neighborhood, with concrete walls between units and no shared outdoor spaces where neighbor disputes could fester. The day I was loading the moving truck, Mrs. Peterson came over one last time. I'm sorry you're leaving, she said. You didn't deserve what happened to you. Thank you, I said. But honestly? I think this whole experience taught me something important about community. It's not automatic just because people live near each other. It has to be built intentionally, with kindness and good faith. And once it's broken, it's really hard to fix. She nodded, looking sad. Do you think you'll ever try again? Building community somewhere new? I loaded another box into the truck before answering. Maybe. But I'll be more careful about how I approach conflicts. I'll try talking face-to-face first, multiple times, before involving the internet. And I'll remember that once you put something online, you lose control of how it's interpreted and shared. What I didn't tell her was that I'd also learned something darker about human nature. How quickly people will believe the worst about someone they don't know well. How social media can turn minor disagreements into major conflicts. How easy it is to destroy someone's reputation, and how hard it is to rebuild it. I've been in my new place for 8 months now. It's quieter here, almost too quiet sometimes. My neighbors are polite but distant, which suits me fine. I keep to myself, mind my own business, and when I hear music or noise from other units, I put in earplugs and remind myself that some battles aren't worth fighting. But late at night, when I can't sleep, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I'd handled that first conversation with Sarah differently. What if I'd brought cookies along with my complaint? What if I'd suggested a compromise right away instead of just asking them to turn it down? What if I'd never posted on Nextdoor at all? Would we have found a way to coexist peacefully? Or was that conflict inevitable, just waiting for the right trigger? I guess I'll never know. But I do know this, the internet amplifies everything. Your frustrations, other people's reactions, misunderstandings, and anger. What might have stayed a minor neighbor dispute 30 years ago can now become a community-wide conflict that follows you everywhere. The scariest part isn't even the harassment or property damage. It's how quickly people you've never met can decide they know everything about who you are based on one post, one mistake, one moment when you're not at your best. Sometimes I search my own name online, just to see what's still out there. Most of the posts have been deleted or buried by time, but some of those memes and screenshots are probably floating around forever. Somewhere out there, people still think of me as that crazy Karen neighbor without knowing anything else about my story. But I survived it. I rebuilt my life, again. I learned that sometimes the price of being right is higher than you're willing to pay, and that's okay. I learned that community is fragile and precious, and that once trust is broken, it's almost impossible to fully repair. Most importantly, I learned that you can't control how other people react to you, but you can control how you react to them. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is just walk away and start over somewhere else. If you've made it this far, maybe you have your own neighbor horror stories or times when social media spiraled out of control. Drop them in the comments, and consider subscribing for more stories about real people surviving impossible situations.